Fear not, Dark Wielders, Parade is here, aka the bringer of pain, aka father of the Sea and Sith, aka King of the Core. And I want to welcome you all to the Core Creators Podcast, where I interview creators across the HoloNet. And today we have the Revenant Resistor, Final Fantasy fanatic, 501st member, and cosplay extraordinaire. You might know her better as Jaynessa. I have special guest Jaye42 from Instagram. How are you today?
Hello. I'm thrilled to chat with you about this. It's my favorite things to talk about, so I'm really, really overjoyed.
Perfect. Yes. I'm taking off the glasses. It's too much. Not wearing the glasses for the whole thing. Yes. My three blind mice, my Morbius. I'm so happy to have you on here. And you were recommended. They're like, you got to have Jaynessa on the podcast. Kate and our friend Corellia, Colin, they're like, you got to have him. So I was like, I got to check it out. And I'm a fan. I saw your, I think it was the Chandrilla outfit for Halcy-Con. Oh, it was peak. It was peak. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
And so
that was fun. I was very taped into that thing. Yes.
and being a fan of yours and scrolling through Instagram, there's so many great looks. I'm an old guard Final Fantasy, so there's a lot of love there for the costume you made. The Sephiroth, so good.
That's actually where I started. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So. Yeah. Was it what came first, cosplay or Star Wars? Because I know some people are different, so I want to start.
Yeah, so Star Wars started for me very, very young.
Okay.
Because my dad introduced me to the original films when I was little.
Yeah.
And so my little sister and I had many of the small scale figures.
Okay. Yeah.
And we would play with them and come up with our own adventures a lot. And very rarely were they adventures of Luke, Han, and Leia. We would always do side adventures with the secondary and tertiary characters, which I think kind of set the stage for how I interact with this universe.
Okay. Was in the original trilogy, did you see them in order like New Hope down, or did you watch them in a different order?
Yes, I watched them in order. I'm not sure if I completely understood the continuity, being that I was just a little youngling at the time. I really loved Return of the Jedi.
Oh yeah.
I think I should have. I think the thing that stuck out to me a lot were the caliber of the creatures and costumes in that film.
Yes.
I think the Ewoks and the Jabba's palace had so many wonderful creatures, and you got to see them a little bit more than you did in episode 4. Like, we all love the cantina scene, but it's very kind of quick.
Yes.
Through all these characters. You got a real good look at these characters. I loved Ula and the Twi'leks, and just the look of those characters really appealed to me. So that was one thing I think started my love affair with how things were created behind the scenes and practical costuming.
Yeah, for me, people who listen to this podcast, Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars film, and the reason being is when I think of Star Wars, I think of Jabba's palace. Like all those creatures in there, the scum and villainy, the adventure, Luke in the black suit, force choking people. Oh, it's great. It's my favorite. It's my favorite.
Yeah, the hood reveals and all that. There's a lot of it's very theatrical, that one, I think, in a way that plays out really fun. And I'm very much a proponent of Star Wars being more of a genre than one thing to like. It's kind of a charcuterie board. I was talking to Corellia about this the other day. And you're free to kind of pick and choose what you love. So, for example, my wife really never loved Star Wars growing up. She thought it was kind of for boys. But she loves Ewoks, and she loved The Force Awakens we brought her, and she loves Grogu and Jawa and all that kind of thing. So there's something in there for everybody, and she loves Skeleton Crew. So it's really fun to see how different people come into this in different phases in their life.
Sure. What's your out of most recent history, like the Disney era of Star Wars, what's your favorite thing that they put out that you've enjoyed the most, you think?
P-70 X-Wings.
Oh, yeah. I know that's your OC's ship, right?
Yeah. If I had to say favorite thing, Poe Dameron.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm hoping that he's involved in some way in the new films or even TV shows. I mean, Oscar Isaac's not above doing Moon Knight, so I hope he wouldn't be above coming back to Star Wars, if they can write him in correctly. But
yeah, no, I agree completely, and I think I loved seeing so many different types of characters get introduced in it, and different archetypes are a lot of fun to play with.
Yeah.
I think looking at all the different types of Star Wars is something I just love about the scrappy rebels in a base pulling themselves together against a shiny, sharply uniformed group of baddies. There's that at the core, I think, is what I love about it.
Okay.
That's kind of that little spark of hope that I enjoy so much about those stories.
Okay, yeah, nice. Now, with your character, tell me about how you built it.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that I met her. I met her at a really good time. So a couple of years back, we were going to go to Galaxy's Edge, and I wanted to dress up somehow.
Yeah.
So my first attempt wasn't a full bound. This did not exist.
It grows over time. Yeah.
It's like and I was a Porg rescuer, so I had like a little box
nice.
that I had 2 little Porglets in, and I thought, oh, they'll be a great conversation starter. So I walk around with this little box of Porgs. I'm like, oh, I'm socializing these Porgs. I run a rescue on Takodana.
Yeah.
It was cute. People really liked it. Ray loved it. All of the cast members on Batuu really loved it. But I noticed that my behavior really shifted there. And I have really strong feelings about creative play and figuring out who you are through costuming.
Yeah.
And I just found that I was a little saucier, a little sassier, a little more trouble. And I'm like, I think this is me if I didn't have any expectations of who I needed to be day in, day out.
Okay.
So that's where she kind of came from. And I started writing some of her backstory just to figure out who she was and to find her headspace. So I can't draw. So for me, costume design is very tactile.
Yeah.
Character design is often cosplay or writing somebody.
Yeah.
So I wrote a brief scene with her, and then, long story short, wound up writing a long story about her that's still ongoing, and I had no intentions of posting it until my wife was like, you should post it.
Sure, yeah.
And the response from folks has been really, really encouraging and wonderful. But her full story didn't happen until after the Star Cruiser, because what happened on it totally changed her trajectory as a character.
Interesting.
So that was really a catalyst for her growing into a fully realized character.
Yeah. Could I ask, so before we get too much further, what did the first outfit as a Porg rescuer look like? Was it more of like a Denizen look, or did it still have like darker tones, blacks, things like that?
Sure. So I wear a lot of darker tones anyway. It's did Luke Skywalker.
Sure.
I actually it was barely even about. I had like a little brown scarf because I felt like brown scarf's inventory.
Sure.
And I had just a T-shirt that said "May the Porgs be with you" with like a little like laurels, kind of like little crests.
Yeah.
And that was it. Maybe some bracelets, like some leather wrap bracelets with little feather style charms on it. That was really it. I think maybe a pair of like ankle boots, and that was it. So it really wasn't all that costumey.
Yeah.
But it grew and grew and grew, and then I started getting a little braver and braver as to what I could wear all day in the park.
Yeah. But you've cosplayed before prior to Galaxy's Edge, so was it still like, oh, it's a theme park, so I can't go full cosplay or costuming in that way?
Yeah, I think it was more that I didn't really want to work on my vacation. I think I wanted to kind of draw a line because I'm not local to the parks.
Right.
Where it's not just something I can run up on the weekend. Sure. So if I'm going, it's typically vacation, and I didn't always feel like that's why she doesn't have like a wig. Normally, a big transformative piece for me is a wig. I need a wig for a character. I'll feel like myself if it's my own hair. That's why I'm stuck with this haircut for the rest of my life. But yeah, I think I didn't want to really cross that line of, well, now I'm on vacation and I'm obligated to do this. But my relationship with her has shifted since then.
Yeah. How long have you been cosplaying for?
20 years.
Wow. That's amazing. It's interesting.
Probably a little longer now.
You know, it's interesting because I've had a lot of people who cosplay or costume or bound now that have never been to conventions. It was like, 2020 COVID is when I started. And so you're one of the few, like me. I started in 2016, 2017.
Oh, yeah.
And it is a lot different. And I'm not going to say okay, it's a lot different from what I'm used to wearing because I do video game cosplays. Like my friend started with Halo, and I did Destiny and like big armory things. And it's nice to talk to someone who are like, I don't really want to go all out at Disneyland. It's a lot of work to be in costumes for a whole convention, not let alone be in Disneyland trying to go on rides around a lot more normies than a convention. So I get the sentiment. For Halloween, though, just really quick, Halloween, do you go big or do you not go big?
I like to go big. There's usually some 501st Legion events.
Okay.
We get very busy in October. But for me, I love to wear something fabulously over the top and meet trick-or-treaters in our neighborhood. So we actually kind of, we're sort of in an awkward dead end. So we go up a block or two and then kind of anchor out with all of our other neighbors and have a little station so all the little gaggles of kids come by.
Oh, nice.
And sometimes I've been like a Sith. Last time I was a very glamorous witch, and like the little ones absolutely flipped out.
I met so many cosplayers, they're like, I don't even dress up for Halloween because they're just like, I do this year round. It's my day off.
It's kind of a cheat for me because I can just go into my bins of stuff and be like, okay, witch, here we go. Just pull something. All right, vampire, we're doing this. All right, mermaid, we're doing this. So I get to be a little more generic and not have to think about it, which is fine and a lot of fun.
Yeah. I did have one question about your OC. I'll plug the Denizens of the Rim Visual Dictionary 2024.
Yes, I have them right here.
We're both in it, and so I was able to peek at your OC's backstory. Where did the Agent Kloss planet background come from? I'm curious because I was like, I'm not familiar with this planet, so I had to look it up before.
Oh yeah. So it's the Resistance base as of the most recent film. And it also worked really well for me because I love warm climates. And I thought she wouldn't mind being there, being that she almost froze to death on Starkiller.
Yeah.
She dislikes the cold very much like I do. So a humid jungle planet seemed like a really good place to put her. It's also a planet that I thought wasn't explored all that much. So I have a lot of freedom to do whatever I want with it. And that's another place where I feel very strongly about canon versus fandom is for canon, I don't really care if a corporation sees something as canon or not because the story makes me feel the way I feel, and that's the way I feel about it. But if I don't like something, I'll just kind of do my own fan project and go in that direction. The way I see it, no matter what happens with this corporate approved Star Wars product in this direction, I have my own little like verse I'm playing in and going off in that direction with it. And so whatever is up with Agent Kloss, future-wise, well, it's a big old jungle. We can explore it.
Yeah. No, it's a cool pull. I haven't gone through everyone's backstory yet, but I'm curious to see where other like little nuggets or Easter eggs of things that I don't know in the Star Wars universe that people have done.
Amazing what people put in there. And what's brilliant about it too, to gush about the project a bit, is that it all feels cohesive, right? It's such a huge galaxy that you can have all these different people from all these different backgrounds with all these different looks and stories, and it's just as tangible to me as Luke Skywalker's story, right? It's just as tangible as Han Solo's story. It's just as tangible as Thrawn's story. It feels lived in, and you can really feel the love for the characters and the amount of work that people have put into those stories. And I think when a character is an extension of yourself, it's a little more personal, right? You're not copying somebody else's character.
Right.
There is a larger part of yourself present in that.
Yeah, I did want to ask, and it still relates. Have you played D&D or do tabletop RPGs at all?
Yeah, my D&D days are kind of left in high school and college. I could not do the 6-hour campaigns anymore. But I loved doing that back then. But I'd never truly built a character that connected with me so much. And I think, and I have a couple of, I can't really call them horror stories, but like awkward stories about attempting a LARP, because I thought maybe a LARP would be more character driven. Because honestly, a lot of the combat and movement technicalities bored me to tears with table tapping. Not knocking it. It just wasn't really for me. I was looking for more like character improv stuff.
Because we did that little project with Corellia Star for the table read, and you did a great job with your voice acting and then building backstories and things. It all just kind of umbrellas into like, oh yeah, we all love Star Wars. There's so many RPG players in Bird New Squad, and it just crossed over. So I was just curious about yours and that. But that's so interesting that none of your the character thing really resonated with you, or because for me, I would say I'm more again around when I started cosplaying 2017ish is when I got into D&D, and it changed my life about like writing and voice acting and all that stuff, and it just kind of fell into it, which led me into Star Wars bounding and these groups and stuff. But for you, how did you get into cosplay?
So many, many, many years ago, I caught wind of a local convention that's now sadly defunct at a college.
Okay.
And my friends and I were like, let's do Final Fantasy cosplay. And let's keep in mind, there were no wig stores online at this point. You could not order a costume. 3D printing was not in anyone's garage. It was go to the thrift store, teach yourself to sew, see what limited fabrics there was, Frankenstein a pattern, draft your own. There were very few resources online. So they were very humble attempts. And so now looking at cosplay, I have mixed feelings because I love that it's more accessible, but I don't love that it's fast fashion-y, and there's a huge umbrella combining sponsored professionals with hobbyists. Like anything else, you see it change over decades. And there was a generation before me that saw it change too. So I grabbed my mom's raincoat and some football pads and spray painted some stuff and used a lot of craft foam and built my first Sephiroth.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he was my first, and he has been with me since I started. So I made him and then remade him a couple years back, and so the coat this time, he formed the armor, and then the third time I redid him, I printed his armor and had like the lace front wig and the special effects contacts. It was really cool to watch him kind of grow as I did as a costumer and see what different skills I could incorporate as he updated along with my journey.
Sure. Was Final Fantasy VII your first entry in Final Fantasy, or did you have?
Yeah, so I played the original on the NES, but FF7 it hit me at a zeitgeist. It hit me at a point where I was hungry for that kind of story. I really enjoyed the moral ambiguities in the story at the time, and even though I was reflecting the other day that the franchise is really no longer what I'm looking for. That's okay. I still really, really value my time with it and acknowledge it as formative and know that the newer editions will garner new fans and new stories and new creativity, right? It's okay to break up with things. But I still love those characters, and I loved the ambiguous villain. I love the villain that had that morality to him to where he didn't start out bad. Something happened to him. That really was very different from what I was used to from a storytelling standpoint. And that angst, I think, really clicked with me, or having to team up with people who were prior your enemies, all of those different story beats in 7 were just perfect for my 15-year-old teenage brain. It got me.
I remember the time and place I was when I was introduced to it, and it was just it felt so random, but it was huge back then. And I didn't really jump in until 8, Final Fantasy 8. That's my formative Final Fantasy game. And I went back and I played the old ones and a few of the newer ones. I didn't stick into PlayStation for too long. But yeah, that brought me into playing RPGs and games and things like that. And,
it's all like a gateway, right? One thing usually, they kind of interconnect. Like, I took a bit of a break between, 12, I think was the last one I had played. Then I took a break, and then a few years ago, I actually got into 15 and was a huge part of that community and met incredible lifelong friends because of that, and did some cosplay from it as well. And that one, I really enjoyed the story. I know it's a oft-discussed entry. It's a polarizing entry. But for me, me and a bunch of my other friends were people who had experienced loss at a young age, I think, really resonated with that story. It's a much more of a subtle story than a let's all fight some big god story. It's a little bit more subtle, and that's not what everybody was looking for, but it worked for me.
Are you, when it comes to media, let's say movies and TV shows, even Star Wars, what's your favorite aspect of it? Like, is it costuming? Is it, narrative? Is it action? What do you usually lean towards?
I don't want to get too Lynchian, but I think like emotional resonance.
Oh, interesting.
Does something make me respond to it emotionally?
Yeah.
That could be a costume. It could be a performance. It could be a character. It could be a setting. It could be a shot. It could be a camera technique.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated with the making of things. I would absorb behind the scenes documentaries like Oxygen when I was younger, and I joke I prefer them to a finished product half the time.
Interesting. Okay.
Show me the puppets.
Yeah.
Show me the set. Show me the costumes being made, those kinds of things. So for me, I find it really hard to pick one thing that I really enjoy because so much of it has to be cohesive to work.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much focus on what doesn't work that I'd rather hear someone talk about what does work in a form of media, right? It's kind of like famously, the late great David Lynch had been asked, "Can you explain why Eraserhead is your most spiritual movie?" And he goes, "No." Very, very funny, but I think that's how I feel about it, to where overanalyzing one particular piece of something can take the emotional piece away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little abstract there.
No. I love that. I mean, here we do a lot of movie reviews and TV reviews, and I feel like people, the reason why I do them, and it just seems like a drop in a bucket of how many people are like reviewing things. I like to explain why, and I overanalyze it, but then I think you're right. There's something emotional that resonates or doesn't resonate that I haven't really heard anyone say it in that way, where I'm like, oh, that's the thing that's missing. There's like, you write it and it's good, but there's no punch to it. Recently we were talking about Nosferatu, and I'm like, in the third act, it's missing a punch that they tried, and it was like a swing and a miss, where I felt like it was missing that, and they could have added that in some way. I don't know how. I usually try to figure out a solution instead of just a criticism. Like, this is how I would do it, but I know they don't pay me in Hollywood to write it.
I know.
But
it's very easy to have a solution when you're not subjected to budgets, other writers, overbearing managers. It's very easy to sit there and go, well, I would have written this like this. And it's like, of course you could have, because you're in an absolute vacuum. Yeah.
Right. And
but I always love discussing media. That's something that I think, creating things is what makes us human. And whether you enjoy something or not, and then figuring out why, is a very revealing discussion about the person who has consumed that media, more so than the media itself.
Yeah. And we joke around, but kind of semi-serious. I'm like, eventually I want to write something, a script or produce something, and then put my money where my mouth is, right? When I'm like, oh, this should be that and this should be that. I'm like, well, can I actually do it, and put out something? And of course I'm expecting criticism too, like, like, well, why'd you do that? Or this was bad. And again, will be constraints with budget and time and things like that. But I'm like, that's one of the goals here that I would like to. So it is cool that, someone who's writing something yourself, do you put it online somewhere? Your backstory, you said it's kind of ongoing, right?
Yeah. So the first part I had finished and did post on Archive of Our Own, AO3. It's called Shattered Fragments. Okay. And it really initially was going to be just a self-indulgent exercise in figuring out this character and fixing things I didn't like and running from there. Like, I have cosplayed and really enjoy the character of General Hux. I was very sad to, spoilers, see him go in the last film. I thought there was great opportunities. Never waste a Gleason. Come on. And I really wanted to see Finn and Poe get together because, as a queer person, I had never seen us represented in Star Wars. Ever in main media. I don't really count one background kiss. That's not good enough.
That's like all soft.
Try. Nice try. And I was fortunate enough to talk to Oscar Isaac about it a couple years ago at New York Comic Con, and he was very equally frustrated. I didn't want to speak for him, Oscar. Oh my gosh, but he seemed very much like it was something he wanted to do, and something that he played it romantically, and really believes in the relationship between those characters. And I'm like, I don't care if some company says it's real or not. To me, that meant something.
Interesting.
To me. And it was nice to be able to talk to him about that.
Yeah.
He was very sweet.
Yeah. He seems like an awesome dude. He's in my top 5 after Moon Knight and his performance there. I'm like, oh, he's top 5 for sure. One movie that doesn't get talked about a lot actually that he was in was King Arthur, and that was forgetting the director who does Gladiator. No one talks about that movie. I'm like, and he's in it as the villain, and I thought he did a good job there. He's great in Ex Machina. Yeah, I'm a big fan of
Ex Machina is brilliant. If you look at Ex Machina and you told me, hey, one of these guys is going to be the evil general and one of them's going to be the dashing young pilot.
Oh, yeah, guys, Donald Gleason's in it, yeah.
I never thought, I'm like, well, Donald is like this rail thin, sweet, precious, naive creature. Then there's like terrifying, binge drinking, robot abusive monster of Oscar Isaac's character. You're like, oh, actually, they're extremely versatile performers. Very talented, skilled people.
You mentioned Hux. What's the draw to Hux to you? Because, I mean, for me, it feels like it's a background character. I would love to get your perspective on the character.
It's funny because that's a response I've gotten a lot. And I remember the first time I ever trooped as Hux, I was sitting backstage just like cooling off for a minute because that outfit's a lot and the hair does not breathe. There's so much product in that wig. It's like it lifts off like a bike helmet.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there cooling off, and one of my fellow Garrison members turns to me and he's like, "So why Hux?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I feel a little bad for him in the sense that I wish his character arc was more fulfilled. Okay. He is a monster, don't get me wrong. He is awful. I also wish there was a little bit more explored about how he was very much raised into this culture and, hid in his room while getting bombed by the New Republic when he was on Arcanus. That's going to radicalize someone.
Yeah.
And I think his character arc, especially when he betrays the First Order to undo Kylo Ren, speaks a lot to radicalization, exposure to violence as a young person, and what that can do to someone when your entire identity is wrapped up in violence.
Yeah.
I would have really liked to see him, and I guess this is slightly spoilers from my own story, but I would have liked to see him try to figure out what worth do you have when there is no active war? What do you do when you have nothing to control at this point? You are raised for this position. You believe you're entitled to this position. You are eternally insecure about being a child born out of wedlock. And then this special boy with pedigree and magic powers gets picked over you out of nowhere. To me, that's interesting. There's a lot to explore there. And you need a good villain to motivate a story. I've always cosplayed villains for the most part. I think because I tend to look more like a villain, I don't really have super soft features, so I tend to be, typecast as the Sephiroth androgynous villain guy. But I think those villains can motivate really interesting stories because they can be very complicated. It's not just, I'm going to take over Galaxy cuz. There's a retaliatory aspect to it. I jokingly say that the Starkiller scene's like the Take That Dad scene, where there's so many insecurities about his father that are getting channeled through that. But it's also my job to overthink him and spend a lot of time in his brain, which is a frightening place to be sometimes. But also, I think it's fiction. I think is a good place to explore those darker aspects of our own personalities.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I didn't know about Hux's background and his background story. I mean, I don't consume too much more out of the mainstream of Star Wars. Like, I haven't really delved into the books or the comics that deep, and I know all these characters have like deeper backstories. It's just time, right? But I like that they introduced, I believe it was his dad in Mandalorian season 3. So I was like, oh, okay, so it's a lineage, right? Of
played by Donald's brother Brian.
There's so many in the family that they can just.
There's Gaglibly, and I well, obviously I think Brendel is named for Brendan Gleeson. Okay. Their well-known father. But it was a perfect casting. I mean, even the voice was eerily accurate. I freaked out. I'm like, for once, I felt like I got a super specific deep cut that was like just for me and 12 other people. We're like, yes, that guy.
But I liked that side. I want to see more of that stuff, what the villains are doing in Star Wars, because mainly we follow the heroes, and that's why I really enjoy I mean, Tales of the Empire could have been better, but Tales of the Jedi following like Dooku, I would love to see Hux be explored in that way. You know, all the side characters, just give them little animated things, just to kind of go, hey, there's more to it than just the Skywalker family and the heroes.
Right.
There's so many other stories to do.
I'm curious if we're ever going to see baby Hux, because he's like 9, between 7 and 8 or 9 years old now. In the Mandalorian timeline. So I'm like, if we saw Brendel, are we going to see baby Hux? Are we going to see Rey Sloane protecting him from his father? Are we going to see that at all? A lot of that was covered in the Phasma book, which I really enjoyed that one. That was that one I read specifically because I knew there was some more about him in there. And I wanted to understand him a little bit better. So
yeah. How did you get with the 501st?
So I had known them for quite a few years and never thought I was good enough. Honestly, I'm like, these guys are movie accurate, next level. Like, I could never touch that. My stuff looks crafty. I could not do it. Right. But I had, done the Hux costume and asked one of people I just known from local conventions for years. I asked her, do you know any good places to photograph these costumes or anything? And she said, well, when are you going to join us? And I had to think about it. And I thought about, how's it going to change my relationship with this character? Because I don't consider myself like an actor, very little training, but I do consider myself a character performer. That's probably the better word for it.
Okay.
So I was thinking like, okay, this means Hux is going to be like, not really my job, but like a hobby with an expectation of quality, to where I need to really think of this character integrity. That's what's really important to me. I don't want people to feel like they're meeting a person dressed up like Hux. I really want to have that presence. The accent, the posture, the words he uses, all of that. I want that to be correct.
Yeah.
And so I did apply, and I got some notes back, which happens a lot. And I made the changes.
Okay.
I had to cut into the beautiful coat and add some seams. That was brutal. It's like... changed up the seams and resubmitted and got approved and did a dance in my kitchen, and then was promptly terrified for my first submission. And for my first troupe, right? We call them troupes when you are, no matter what it is, if you're out doing something in costume, it's a troupe.
Okay.
And I was mortified, but I had so much fun. It was so rewarding, and I've legitimately been addicted to it ever since. It's just been the best decision I've ever made as a costumer.
Nice. Did you ever, I guess it's even more so than conventions then, huh? Like, it's a different experience?
Yeah, because you're sort of entertaining people, so it is work.
Yeah.
I think when you go to a convention, sometimes it's always work for me, because just socializing is work sometimes. It just, meeting new people and all that, it's a lot. You're giving a lot of energy. But something I love to do is try to bring people into the universe, even if we have like 6 square feet to do it. Even if I have a table with a tablecloth, I still want to connect with someone and give them a character interaction and make their day a little brighter. Maybe give them an Imperial citation. Maybe joke with them a little bit, rib them a little bit playfully. Or if it's a young kid or someone reacting to a droid, really try to give them an incredible interaction, because everything we do has to be for charity. So I'm already there for a great cause.
Right.
But if I can make someone's day a little more exciting, or make them laugh, or even give someone a little sampling of creative play that they might not have participated in for a couple of years, that's really rewarding to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really very noble. I love that, because
thank you.
I think some people...
It felt like a selfish hobby for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it in a way to knock anybody. I mean it in early 20s. My brain was like, what can I do to win this cosplay competition? Look at me, I'm wearing this, And, I'm 38 now, so I'm like, I don't want to be competing against 20-year-olds. Like, I kind of want to let the kids do their thing. And so my relationship with cosplay was sort of in flux for a really, really long time. But now, with the Legion, it gives me purpose and a high-quality standard for a particular thing. So when I do everything else, I can play.
Yeah.
Right. It feels like it liberated me a little bit. Like I can kind of do whatever I want. Like with Jaynessa's outfits, I can kind of do whatever I want.
Yeah.
But with the Legion, well, there's very strict rules, and it lets me play in both ways.
Yeah. I'm right there with you, because conventions were work for me. Even though it's like, oh, we're all gonna go and have fun. And I'm like, dude, I'm still painting, I'm con crunching, sleepless nights.
Yes.
And now I'm worried about people looking at me and taking pictures. The costume contest, 2-3 hours in the back, disorganization.
Exhausted.
It's so
right.
tiring.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh, I could just wear soft goods and play online, take pictures online with my friends, and then that's just so much easier. Ignorance is bliss when it comes to, like I said before, just I just joined in COVID. I'm like, oh, you're having a great time, because you go to these conventions with like my competitive nature. It's work. It was a lot of time. I look back at it as fond memories, but there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over that time period.
Definitely. But I also think it puts you where you are now. Like my drive to appropriately represent a character, I think, is what makes me so driven to do well for the Legion. Like even my officer characters that aren't canon characters, I still want to develop a strong character.
Yeah. And
develop a character that people can interact with in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody walking by and have me be like on my phone. That would not bring somebody to the universe.
Right.
I really want to bring someone to the universe. And the other day, we were doing a sports game and somebody said, oh, when they walked away, they're like, oh, wow, it's just like Disney. And the performers in Disney and the Star Cruiser and all those folks are just a masterclass.
Mm-hmm.
They're so skilled and so brilliant at what they do day in, day out, with people who might not have ever had any sort of creative play recently.
Yeah.
That I just hearing that kind of melted my heart. I'm like, oh, if I can be just a modicum of that, if I can bring like a sliver of that to someone,
I'm happy. Right.
For the rest of my life, honestly. Yeah.
I love, that was always my favorite interaction, is the little kids, because you're the actual character for them.
Yes.
You're the actual character. They want to take a picture. They want to hug. It's like, oh, wow, like this actually means something to them, more so than someone who's just appreciating the work and effort into the costume.
Right.
It's great.
Right.
It's so
right.
great.
Like we, have some incredible Rays that we work with, some incredible Kylos that we work with. And even when I'm being a generic character, I try to kind of work the crowd a little bit more.
Yeah.
And kind of either warm people up or get them in the right direction or give a little bit of banter with the droids. But I've even had a handful of kids flip out over Hux. And I'm like, I'm here for these weird kids. Because that was me, the weird kid who liked the secondary villain. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I had a little girl like jump up and down and like freak out over me a couple troops ago. And I was like, yeah, awesome. It's really fun to see that. Nobody's really eager to hug him. But it's really fun to be able to play a villain and be a little nasty in a fun way.
Yeah.
But also know how to not cross that line for like the kids. We get a lot of special needs kids who really connect with our droids.
Yeah.
And those moments are just, sometimes I have to turn away. I can't even, like I'm trying to look all stink-faced. And then this little kid is like touching R2 gently on the face and I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I can't. It's too stinking cute.
Yeah, that's adorable. Could you tell me a little bit about your Halcyon Experience and Halcy-Con?
Oh, yeah.
I know there's two different things, but I don't want to forget to ask you about
the
follow-ups and possible future ones.
It's wild because I'm going to get it out of the way and say, I've never seen people who've never had an experience have such strong feelings about it. Seriously.
Yeah.
Y'all okay? I hope you get better. No, seriously. People who can still send me hate messages about the Star Cruiser. Are you okay?
Are you serious? Really? That's awful.
I got slurs dropped when that YouTube video came out into my inbox, and I'm like, guys, go do something else. Go do something. You're not going to change my mind.
People have too much time on their hands.
Problem is, they're probably 15.
Oh, okay.
And that's a problem in and of itself, is that I have to be exposed to the opinions of snotty teenagers.
Yeah.
God. No. But that out of the way. The Star Cruiser was a brilliant, absolutely life-changing experience, and the fact that people still call it a Star Wars hotel shows that people still have no criffing clue what it was. it really was a live theater experience for 3 days, and I have my criticisms of it. Sure. I have my criticisms of Disney. Sure. I have been called a shill. I'm not a shill. I'm not a Disney travel agent. I'm the first person to go, they closed it because Bob Iger needed his second yacht. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I can get a little spicy about my opinions of the parks. Being a parks fan is like being a disappointed parent. You love them. You know they can do better.
100%, 100%.
And they cost you a lot of money.
This is a safe space podcast. We can talk openly. There's no sponsorship.
Like, knock on my door. No. Yeah, and there's a whole other discussion. But sure. So I saw the first promo and was like, what is this? But I never liked the Disney Channel, like, hey, look at this kind of promos. Yeah. Like, that is such the wrong approach. Hard stop. Bad.
Yeah.
Bad. But what I saw was, and I'm going to name drop her, Brooke McDonald, who is a travel agent. She's just like total sweetheart. Uh-huh. I saw her posts and I was like, oh, this looks like exactly like what I want to do, because it's very character driven. Mm-hmm. The building looked amazing. The food looked amazing. Yeah. The performers were what really drew me into it. And I thought, wow, this could be really cool. Now, I didn't know at that time if it was going to be canon to Jaynessa's story or not, because I thought, well, it's kind of a lot. She's already been through a lot. Is this another thing that should happen? So I'm like, let's see how it goes.
It's like, I love that. She's been through a lot. I don't know.
I don't know if this is going to be canon for her story, because that'd be a heck of a day. But I wound up booking it with my wife, my little sister, and our best friend. Okay. So we had a crew. Yeah. And we're all unique people in the sense that I'm the hammiest out of everybody. Uh-huh. My sister and I are equally chaotic. My sister plays a droidsmith.
Okay.
My wife was our holo scanner, because she's not really... she's an introvert. She's not really an actor, performer, what have you.
Sure.
But she did wind up playing along, which is pretty amazing. That's a testament to the brilliance of the experience.
Yeah.
And then our best friend played our archaeologist.
Oh, okay.
So we had all these different people kind of coming together in this experience. And, we booked it. It was about $1,700 a person. And I say that because people told me I paid $8,000 for it. It was by cabin. You paid by the cabin, like a cruise. I gotta mind my sodium intake. Right, so that's about what we paid, and that included our food, the parks, and then, the 2 nights, the 3 days, transportation, drinks, all those fancy lattes I was slamming to keep up with the actors, so on and so forth. What really blew my mind was when I realized that it wasn't on me to make sure things go well or not.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes, like, even in video games, I get very stressed if the decision is, like, save the village or save the orphanage full of kittens.
Yeah. I've had those moments. I'm like, let me put my controller down and give me a few minutes to ponder this decision. Unless it has a timer.
And, like, don't get me wrong, I love a good story, and I'm really enjoying Baldur's Gate and stuff, but half the time it's like, dying and Googling, like, oh, if I do this, will this guy explode in the last 5 minutes? Like, please help me here.
Just flip through the strategy guide really quick.
Right, like, yeah. Tell me a story.
Yeah.
So all your decisions, they're not really superficial, but if I did something wrong, it wouldn't derail the story or blow up the ship, right? So no matter what, I knew the good guy's going to win at the end. And I realized at a certain point that it's kind of on rails with flexibility between cutscenes.
Correct.
Right, so it's kind of like a Final Fantasy game, right? To where you have all kinds of things you can do, but you have set points that will happen. When I realized that, I could breathe. And the coolest part was when the actors started to trickle into the atrium, because you show up, we had lunch, we got in our beautiful cabin, we started doing problems already, we tried to break into some of the rooms and stuff, and then all of a sudden a Rhodian shows up, and I'm like,
Wani.
I was like gushing over her, and she's like very saucy, Wani the Rhodian, and I loved that because she's like this little like bug-headed creature with the little mouth, and she was fully animatronic, so her eyes are moving and her eyebrows are moving and her little mouth is going.
Yeah.
And she was like saucy. I loved that about her. She had like a big purple braid and stuff. So cute. And my wife was completely smitten with her immediately. She's like, I love her. And the story I've told a million times before, and I'll try to make it quick, is being that my character was a prisoner of the First Order. I knew that I was going to go in and try to infiltrate the First Order and stop them because she wouldn't want them to hurt anybody else. She's trying to go on vacation and the First Order shows up. Come on.
Yeah.
But what I didn't expect was a performer that I had met 2 days before on Planet to show up, playing a different but similar role. So when I saw him come out as Lieutenant Croy, the First Order character in the story, I was like, oh, how are we gonna do this? Because like I met him as somebody else 2 days ago. Is he gonna act like he doesn't know me? Like what are we gonna do?
Yeah. And
he had the quick-wittedness to play it like we had known each other. I was like, oh. So he kind of played it like, oh, you're an old acquaintance. It's so good to see you.
Yeah. Real quick,
and I'm
can
like,
I interrupt you?
He has no idea I'm resistant.
Is he, when you met on, you said so on Planet, so on Batuu, you met him there?
Yes.
And what character was he playing there? Was he playing another Imperial there, or was he playing a different...
Yeah, so on Planet, it's Lieutenant Agnon. Who, no matter what performer is playing the First Order Lieutenant, the character is Lieutenant Agnon.
Agnon, okay.
And a lot of the performers at the time were rotating. Like, Agnons would be Croy, Croys would be Agnons, so on and so forth. Some of them would, at least.
And so a lot in Halcyon, he's playing a different character?
Yes.
Or in your headcanon, was he...
Different name.
Okay.
But very similar performance in the sense that you got this sort of uppity, overly confident, doomed for self-destruction First Order character, right? Who was just there for your protection and your safety, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I immediately got First Order credentials, and after like 2 days of aggressive flirting, wound up betraying him at the end, and it was brilliant. I'm fortunate that a lot of the performers and crew and passengers on my journey and other journeys are now lifelong friends.
That's awesome.
That I try to get to see them when they're performing, whether it's in or out of the parks.
Yeah.
I'm going to support their endeavors and just love them as people because they were just brilliant to work with. And I realized how much I learned from them. I mean, I went on the Star Cruiser about 2 weeks after my grandmother had passed away. Oh. And there was a big discussion with one of the Saja, who were like these sort of Force monks in a way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she put on this brilliant show just for me and one other friend, because we went back to the ship early and brought us into the climate simulator. Because I had told the captain, no matter how I behave, ignite the spark, I'm on your side.
Nice.
And she told me to find her the next day. So I found her, and she leans in. Like, it's just me sitting on a bench, my friend next to me, and this woman leans in, and she, like, locks eyes with me, and she goes, what happened to you? And I was just like... chills.
Don't ask me that.
I just told her everything, and I'm crying. Like, it was just so... It was such a moment, and even in canon for my character, it was the first moment she had used the Force that it didn't hurt her. So that was very healing for me in Jaynessa's story and in my own life as well. It was brilliant. I will never forget how light my heart felt getting off that ship. I'm like, this was like therapy. It was brilliant, aside from the little bit of the mess. So the second arc of my story, I wasn't really planning it. I thought it was going to be one and done, but I kept realizing there's no closure with Lieutenant Croy for the actor and people on the ship together, because he gets hauled off at the end. Yeah. He gets hauled off at Blaster Point. You don't really know what happens to him. So I was like, these two have to see each other again at some point. Like, I can't just leave that hanging. Yeah. Something has to happen to let these two characters work out what happened, because it was ugly. And for both my own purpose and Jaynessa's purpose and Croy's purpose, I think there needs to be some sort of confrontation between them. And that's kind of the arc of the second piece. It's really fun to play that and add the little Star Cruiser nods. And Halcy-Con has been... just going was so amazing. I felt like I was back on the ship. So many faces I had only seen on the HoloNet, in person. Yeah. Walking into a room on Thursday and having a person I'd only seen online look at me and go, Jaynessa, that kind of thing. I'm like,
yeah. My people.
I am home. I love these people. They're so creative, and so many of them are artists, or they're not, and they love doing things on the side. Yeah. the outpouring of love. There seems to be a highly empathetic group of people who got a lot out of that experience.
Yeah.
And they're willing to share it and continue to share it. Like half of the stuff behind me are things from friends that artists made.
Yeah.
Or modeled. Like Guy's microphone, Brian Anderson, Stormtrooper guy, modeled that. And I printed my own. So, that kind of sharing is really, really brilliant.
That's so cool. Are you planning to do Halcy-Con again? Maybe this year or following year?
I'm going this year again. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm excited about it. New fits to bring.
Yeah. It's on my list because I had Kate Ryder on the show. I've had Holoscans Database. I had a Junk Trader Outpost. So I make sure everyone got a little bit of their take on what they experienced there, and it was like FOMO to the max. And I'm like, I haven't been on the Halcyon, but this sounds like right up my alley.
The vendor room alone.
Yeah.
Almost took me out. I was like, well.
And I want to go, but I have a Japan Star Wars Celebration coming up.
Yes.
And so depending on how funds go, I don't know if I would be able to make it to this year, but if they do it again, it's definitely something.
I hope so. It seemed wildly successful. Everybody had a great time, and the vibes were excellent. You know, it felt, and after going to big huge cons, they can be a lot of fun.
Yes.
But there's something to be said about a smaller scale con.
Yes.
That is really enjoyable. And it brings me back to those early days, right? Where everybody at the con was your friend.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to talk and say hi, and you get to know a lot of people versus shuffling shoulder to shoulder past a ginormous booth for a movie that's coming out. And the shows can be wonderful, and I love seeing people being able to celebrate things en masse.
Yeah.
But it does lose a certain something when there's nowhere to sit and, hang out.
Right. Or it's so big you can't find anybody, or you're running around like trying to go to panels and trying to do this and try to do that. And like these smaller ones, I'm like, I get to talk and socialize and learn about people. Like, at a smaller scale, you're like, how'd you do that cosplay? And like, so there's that. It's that more that intimate thing.
One of my favorite memories is just sitting down and having breakfast with two folks who I'd known from online.
Yeah.
But we just sat there for like an hour or two just chatting.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I missed anything because this is what I was here for.
Yeah.
I was here to connect with these people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait to go and meet all the HoloNet friends. But
hope to see you there.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that, like, at least with technology now, we can do these calls and we can be on these chats and share photos and talk about Star Wars stuff and grow in that way. Because without it, we would just be in our little bubbles and not isolated.
Yeah, with a fandom as large as Star Wars, I think the artificialities of fandoms becomes much clearer, and the monetization of fandoms, not in I don't mean like artists selling pins kind of way. I mean like rage bait, click, garbage, that kind of stuff, can be so prevalent that talking to actual people who hold legitimate feelings and want to talk about something that means something to them is refreshing, to say the least.
100%. Yeah. Any plans that you have, or costume plans maybe to add to Jaynessa, or any other like big costumes for there that you're working on that you could kind of give us a little taste of?
I'm redoing, I just finished the headpiece. Back on the Star Cruiser, I'd worn this black robe for the first night, the Gaia concert, and I was like 80% happy with it.
Okay.
So I'm tweaking that a little bit, and at first I thought it looked a little too Japanese. Now, I studied Japanese since middle school. I did a homestay over there. I love the culture and all that.
Nice. Yeah.
And I was like, this is a little too... But then I saw, and this is actually what solidified her homeworld as Chandrila, I saw Mon Mothma and the other Chandrilans pretty much just wore like yukata and kimono inspired pieces. I'm wow, I'm good. Never mind. Great. Perfect. So I'm adding a couple more pieces to that, and those are kind of what I have for her, but I'm always getting inspired by her. And always modifying different things and adding accessories and doing different things to explore within her. Like even in March, I'm going to be going down for a short trip because it's like a work trip. I'm going to try to see some friends. So I have like a really, really light outfit that I'm bringing for her. More of a casual piece.
Yeah.
Right? That I can just throw my suitcase and go. And I'm currently putting together, finishing the prop this weekend, hopefully, Asterion from Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
I was told about a year ago that I have to be this character, and didn't really play the game until about a month ago. I started playing
recently,
the game and was like, oh, I see it. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. They nailed it.
You all are right. I had no choice. Like, this is... Yes, so those are my plans, and I'm updating my Shadow the Hedgehog as well, because I love Sonic games, I love Shadow, I love the new movie, made me so happy, and I have this, like, kind of punk boy Shadow with this, like, black and red wig that's all spiked, and I just reprinted new limiters and did new shoes for him,
Very
so
cool.
those are kind of fun, and I'm redoing my First Order Lieutenant uniform in a different fabric, so I'm resewing that one totally from scratch. No time limit on it. I want to complete it by the summer, but I really want to take my time on that and do a good job worthy of the First Order.
Yeah. Okay, so one last question that I have for you. I'm trying to get into sewing. Do you have any good tips for first timer?
Yeah, of course. So there's two ways you can go. You can either start with something you have and modify it, like learn to do a hem or learn to sew a button. Or I usually recommend getting a simple pattern, even off of Etsy for like $1 or $2, right? And practicing on a cheap fabric. And that could mean you get some sheets from a thrift store and you cut them up or something.
Yeah.
You should do mock-ups anyway. I rarely do. But that way you can familiarize yourself with the lingo, what's interfacing, what's an overlock stitch, like just all those terms.
Yeah.
I learned very chaotically because there weren't a ton of tutorials, but even now, if I'm sewing a welt pocket and I'm just suffering, I will go back and look up somebody doing an amazing tutorial in 1 minute how to do a welt pocket. I'm like, why wasn't I not taught that way? Because sewing, and I consider my sewing not terrible. I've been able to make 501st approved uniforms and all that. It's not my favorite piece of creating, and because it can be very tedious. But also it's a rewarding one.
Yeah,
I like props and accessories the most. But when it comes to knowing how to sew, I think just having even the basic fundamentals will help you be able to do so much more. Like even yesterday when I was prepping this outfit, I pulled it out and kind of looked at it and I was like, man, I really want to change up the pouching. You don't even see it, but I changed up these pouches on this and then put all the webbing on it. And I just wanted to do that. And I was able to do that, right? But if I didn't have that basic thing, I would have been like hand stitching, wrestling with it, that kind of piece. So even just getting a basic understanding of simple stitches, how to sew a waistband, how to hem something, how to sew on a patch, that kind of thing, can make a huge difference in just adding it to your toolbox. So with cosplay, I know some people who are just brilliant tailors. They just know how to sew. Sewists even is a great term for it. That is what they do, right? And then I know other people who build droids and they can sew. Like some people do everything, but most people have like a focus thing they love how to do, and that's kind of their honed in bit. I'd rather print and make 5 props before I have to sew a whole thing for myself, but usually I will do all of it if I have to. But also, going back to the resources thing, as you get older, I say it's completely fine to source pieces. I am a big fan of sourcing pieces because as you get less time, you feel free to do that. There's no problem with that. And finding a piece that'll work, thrifting is notoriously awesome for Star Wars. And if you thrift a piece and you can modify it, win-win, right?
Yeah. I just went on a Goodwill shopping spree. Like spend more money than I usually do at Goodwill just because our group they've been sharing things. I'm like, well, I guess I got to go and try to find something. And I found some good stuff. So I was very excited. The second hand is the way to go. Yeah.
And I think with coming up with a character, a bounding character, a denizen, whatever it may be, I was thinking, because I was anticipating the question of, what about the rules? I was joking with a couple of friends the other day because we were laughing about like laces on boots and glasses and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to take the really controversial opinion and say I don't have any rules.
Oh, yeah.
My only rule is to not make a fictional universe more important than somebody's creativity, and do what you want. Right? Yeah. There's days when I can't get my contacts in. I'm gonna have glasses, okay? Yeah. I'll take them off for a photo, I guess. I love these boots. Let me see if I can show them to you appropriately without kicking things over. I love these boots. You're not gonna take them away from me.
Get out of here with those laces.
Yeah, no. I wore these on the Star Cruiser, and they were showstoppers, and I love them. Now, I'm not going to wear these to the parks because... But, I think it's fine. Hey, the Rebels had lace-up boots on the Force Moon of Endor.
Yeah, it's there. It exists. I was like, there's no way these things don't exist in this vast galaxy. There's no way.
Sure. I mean, like, Luke zips up his X-Wing flight suit, but I understand not wanting certain aesthetics for your character.
Sure.
Apply that to your own character. Yeah. No problem. Absolutely. Yeah. But if you're going to do your own thing, some people have looked at Jaynessa and been like, oh my God, that's a lot. I'm like, yeah, she's a lot, but this galaxy's a lot. Right. And we need more space goths. Yeah. So yeah. She's out there doing her thing.
Yeah, I think it's however you feel comfortable expressing yourself in that universe. Like, I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. And some people feel differently, and that's fine. That's their opinion. But I'm not going to...
Oh, absolutely. And I think what I mentioned earlier is, working with the Legion, there's so many rules there.
Yes, there's a lot of rules.
That when I'm let loose, I'm going to be let loose. Yeah. I'm going to do whatever I want. Like the one formal jacket I wore to the Star Cruiser had like buttons, like Hussar style buttons down the chest. Yeah. I love how that looked.
Yeah.
I just like how it looked. It looked cool. I liked it. It had like a hidden zipper up it, but I liked how it looked. I thought it was beautiful. Yeah. And I think it's okay to play in that and have that sort of not feel like you have to do a certain thing if you don't want to. Now, if you really want to have one of your characters fit into one of the fan groups, sure, there's guidelines there, or maybe adapt them for it.
Yeah.
Or come up with another character for it. But I always think first and foremost, you should be able to find that self-expression in a joyful way, in a fulfilling way to develop those characters.
Yeah, I love that.
At least that's what I try to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think we need to beat the drum more on that, because as Star Wars grows, we're going to see so many other looks. We're going to see so many different things, and there's glasses in Star Wars now. There's laces, and we found some in Andor recently. I'm like, oh, that guy has laces on his shoes.
Yeah.
I just noticed, because I'm like looking harder because I'm rewatching Andor before April for season 2, and I noticed one character had big plastic buckles. And I'm like, I got a ton of those. I didn't know that existed. And people are like, someone was like, oh yeah, they've been using that since the original trilogy. I'm like, I've never noticed. Like in most costumes I've seen online, I don't really see anybody use them. So I'm like, oh, okay, they don't exist. But now I feel like I have found them on a canon TV show. They exist. So I feel free to use it if I need to. Just because I don't like the constraints on some of the things. Like one of the jackets that I have has like zippers, and they're not like super noticeable. And personally, I would love to cover them. I just don't have a great idea of how to right now. But I'm like, I really like this jacket and I want to rock it. So it just, to me, it's also like problem solving in a creative way too is also fun.
Absolutely. So, I think more than anything, I think people want it to not look too earthy. And that's what the real intention is, right? Correct. The real intention is not to ban all zippers, but to not make it look like you just grabbed something off of the shelf and wore it.
Right.
You want something a little, because a lot of the Star Wars pieces were already vintage in the 70s, right? They were military surplus stuff.
Yeah.
So you saw a certain style and it's within that. Like even when I was putting this room together, you can't see the whole of it, but one of my rules for lighting was no light bulbs and no lampshades, because I thought that would look a little too Earth.
Yeah.
So all of my light fixtures are really wacky because I wanted them to be interesting pieces that didn't look like a light bulb sticking out of something, because you don't really see that. You see a lot of diffuse light and glow panels and that kind of thing. A lot of natural light. But if you're in this kind of cabin, this small cabin in a ship, how would you light it? Like, well, thank goodness for Home Goods. Can kind of step around and find some interesting one-off pieces.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So all my in-universe stuff lives down here, while my action figures and such live upstairs. Although I guess some are kind of on the fence because I have like some plush porgs and cats and the like down here.
Yeah. I like try to separate. Yeah, even me too. I'm like, oh, this is the corner where I have like my in-universe, cantina stuff and my lightsabers, and then I'm like, oh, in this corner is like all the orange things. So I have like Ewoks and droids and stuff that are orange. I'm like, that's how I designed it.
Well, what's so fun with it is that you can put it in all these different places. Like even when I go to Galaxy's Edge, I'm like looking for things that I could add to the room.
Yeah.
That I would find beautiful, or like Junk Trader's Outpost actually did this beautiful Chandrilla medallion. Those kinds of things. It's just. It brings me a lot of joy to have things that were made by my friends.
For sure.
From all around the world.
Yeah.
On the walls and then hanging up and on the shelves and stuff. It just kind of reminds me about all the reasons that we love this community so much and love to keep creating in this world.
100%. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. And I would love to have you on again to pick your brain about more Star Wars stuff. And
anytime.
Your second visit to Halcy-Con and maybe your visits at Galaxy's Edge. But where can people find you again?
Yeah, anywhere you see Jaye42, Jaye42. But if you're looking for Shattered Fragments, I go by Obsidian Sky on that one.
Okay. Is that in your link tree? Because I'm going to put our link trees in the description.
It is. It is in my link tree. Again, I was initially real shy about it, but you know what? I say if you could be open about writing self-insert Star Wars fan fiction when you're almost 40, you are liberated.
Yeah, you're in good company here. Well, I'd like to thank everyone.
Don't be embarrassed. Yay!
Yeah. No, don't be embarrassed at all. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in for this episode of the Core Creators Podcast. Again, make sure you go to the links below, follow Jay, and check out the cool, awesome cosplays and costumings and the future ones coming up. And the lost cats.
Bye-bye.
And I hope you all have a great rest of your galactic day. Punch it, Chewie. Boom. We're out of here. Bye, guys.